Radar screens flickered as a small, unidentified aircraft breached controlled airspace without prior communication. At first, no one paid attention. Blips come and go, false signals, low-flying cargo planes with outdated transponders, or private jets that simply forgot to check in. But this was different. The aircraft wasn't following any known flight plan. It wasn't broadcasting an identification code. It didn't respond to hails on emergency channels. Came in low, under radar, hugging the valleys until it suddenly appeared, just 50 miles out, heading straight toward the restricted sector. The command center, buried beneath layers of concrete and silence, was designed for calm under pressure. But this situation brought a chill. The operator on duty leaned closer to the screen, tapping a few keys to bring up more data. Nothing. No ID. No manifest. No affiliation. For a moment, there was a beat of uncertainty. Then protocol kicked in. The airspace had been quiet for weeks. A calm before something no one expected. The unidentified object moved with precision, not like a lost civilian plane. It didn't wobble or adjust course. It held steady, as if it knew exactly where it was going. That's when the call went up the chain. First to the base commander, then to regional defense. Within minutes, the alert status changed. DEFCON remained unchanged, but inside the bunker, the tone shifted from passive monitoring to controlled urgency. A young lieutenant pulled a headset over his ears, trying one last time to make contact. His voice, calm but insistent, repeated the standard international hail. Unidentified aircraft, you are entering restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately or you will be intercepted. Static. Then silence. The aircraft did not respond. It didn't even slow down. On screen, it moved with eerie confidence. Its size suggested a one-man aircraft, perhaps a modified fighter or a recon drone, but its design didn't match any known military profile in their system. And yet, it was fast. Too fast for anything civilian. It was climbing now, almost daring them to respond. The command center's mood thickened. Orders were issued. Interceptors scrambled. 2 F-35s, already fueled and waiting on the tarmac, roared down the runway within minutes. Pilots briefed on the unknown, told to approach with caution but be ready for escalation. The unidentified aircraft was now within 20 miles of the high-security base, home to assets that were never spoken of outside those walls. The base's highest-ranking officials began to gather behind the operators. Eyes fixed on the screen, breaths held. This wasn't just a breach, it felt intentional. The aircraft's angle of approach, its silence, the precision, it all hinted at something deeper. Not a mistake. Not a lost pilot. Something else. Then came the first visual. A satellite image refreshed just in time to catch a glimpse. A sleek, matte gray body, sharp-edged wings, and a cockpit tinted pitch black. No visible markings. No flags. No tail number. It looked like something from the future or something forgotten from the past. By now, the F-35s were airborne, speeding toward the object. Pilots radioed in every few seconds, updating altitude, speed, bearing. Tension mounted. The last time something like this happened, it had ended in a classified takedown, and half the details never saw daylight. Inside the command center, the temperature seemed to drop. Protocol required strict engagement rules, but the unknowns made everything shaky. This wasn't just an airspace violation anymore. This was a question without an answer. One that echoed across every terminal and through every headset. Who was flying that aircraft and why now? The order came down quickly, slicing through layers of command with the weight of finality. There was no room for debate. The moment the unidentified aircraft crossed into restricted airspace and refused to respond to multiple hails, it had moved from a suspicious anomaly to a certified threat. The designation was clear: intercept and, if necessary, neutralize. The protocol, refined over decades of near misses and tense encounters, was now in full motion. In the hardened underground operations room, voices turned sharp, professional, stripped of emotion. Senior Command reviewed live feeds, thermal imaging, and the latest Intercept telemetry. Still, the aircraft offered no clues. No insignia, no IFF signal, no deviation in flight path. Whoever was flying it, they weren't lost, and they weren't trying to hide anymore. They were heading straight for the heart of a facility that was never meant to be approached unannounced. Authorization codes lit up across terminals as the green light for engagement was transmitted to the interceptor pilots. 2 F-35s, already en route, acknowledged the update in clipped, precise language. Their systems adjusted. Targeting software engaged. Long-range visuals came into view. The bogey was sleek, almost too clean for a standard fighter. Its wings sharp, fuselage low profile, minimal heat signature. It moved like it had been built for one thing: evasion. Yet it wasn't evading. It was coming straight in. In the cockpit of the lead F-35, the pilot narrowed his eyes beneath the sun visor. He'd flown dozens of intercepts before, but something about this felt staged, off-pattern. The bogey wasn't accelerating. It was holding a constant speed, like it knew how close it could get before triggering another level of response. He double-checked his radar. The target was real. Not a drone. Not a decoy. A manned aircraft or something made to mimic one exactly. Behind him, his wingman radioed in. Still no ID. No change in vector. Orders remain green. The lead pilot gave a quiet nod to himself and began maneuvering to close the gap. They were approaching visual range. In moments, the object would be within missile lock distance. Back at the base, officers debated in hushed tones over encrypted comms. The intercept order was active, but there was still hope, thin as it was, that the pilot might respond under pressure. One last transmission was broadcast on all emergency frequencies. This time it was the base commander himself, a voice known to all Allied forces and one that carried the authority of decades of combat command. The transmission ended. Still, the aircraft held its line. No break. No reply. The countdown began inside the F-35's heads-up display. The bogey was now marked as a hostile contact. Lock-on systems engaged, HUD turned amber, then red. One flick of the thumb and the missile would be armed. The pilot's fingers hovered over the controls. Years of training had taught him to act, not think, but instinct wrestled with routine. Why hadn't the intruder tried to flee? Why no aggressive maneuvers? Why no countermeasures? It was almost too calm, too deliberate. The aircraft floated through the sky like it belonged there, like it was returning to something it never should have left. Back in the command center, another call came through, a classified channel encrypted with a level few were cleared to access. It wasn't intelligence. It wasn't a status update. It was a single line of coded instruction. A recognition protocol rarely used, tied to a list of call signs that had been decommissioned years ago. The call sign on that list matched the frequency the intruder had just blinked into. A ghost channel. One that should have been buried and forgotten. The two F-35s closed the distance quickly, their engines humming with restrained power as they maintained a strict formation. The bogey was now within visual range, and every second was critical. In the lead jet, the pilot adjusted his visor, narrowing his gaze on the object ahead. His targeting systems lit up with data: altitude, speed, distance. Missile lock was ready, guns armed, but he hesitated. Not out of fear. He had flown missions over hostile terrain, stared down enemies with real intent, but because something about the craft ahead didn't match the hostility they'd been briefed on. The unknown aircraft was gliding through the sky with a kind of eerie steadiness. No sudden movements, no erratic dodges. It didn't try to escape, even now with two armed jets flanking it. That kind of calm didn't fit the behavior of a threat. It was deliberate, focused, almost rehearsed. The pilot keyed his comms. "I've got eyes." Visual confirmation in 3, 2, 1. And then he saw it. The aircraft was unlike any standard fighter in the catalog. Its skin was matte black, almost blending with the sky, and its profile was narrow, stealth-optimized, minimal radar reflection. It didn't match any enemy signature the database could pull. But what caught his attention wasn't the aircraft's body or even the strange curvature of its wings. It was something painted on the side, partially concealed under years of weathered grit and faded sun. Patch. Not a modern-day squadron emblem. Not one used by any currently active unit in the Air Force or Navy. This was different. It was old, roughened at the edges, but unmistakable. A symbol he hadn't seen in years. A phoenix rising from barbed wire flames, wings spread across a lightning bolt, emblem of a covert squadron that had been officially disbanded a decade ago after a catastrophic mission no one was allowed to talk about. His eyes widened. His breath caught in his throat. His memory raced back to whispers in briefings, war stories told behind closed doors, and the name of a pilot once thought MIA, possibly Kia, with no official record of return. He flicked to a private channel. Confirming patch. Repeat, confirming insignia on the craft. Not hostile. Not known enemy. Possible Echo Phoenix. There was a pause on the other end. The silence was louder than any reply. The wingman, just seconds behind, came up on the other side of the craft. I see it too. Confirmed. Echo Phoenix insignia. What the hell is going on? The aircraft remained silent, making no contact, offering no signals. It just flew, steady, intentional, and somehow, that old insignia painted onto its hull screamed louder than any weapon system or coded message ever could. It was like a ghost had stepped out of the past and dared them to question it. At that moment, the weapon systems on the F-35s remained armed, but neither pilot had the will to push the trigger. It wasn't fear. It was reverence. Whoever was flying that jet wasn't just someone in the wrong place. They were someone who had once been in every right place, someone who had done the impossible and vanished into the black ink of history. The lead pilot clicked open a secure channel to command, speaking in measured words. We have a situation. Aircraft is marked. Patch matches restricted registry. Awaiting new orders. Recommend hold fire. The response didn't come immediately. The control room back at the base was now likely in chaos. Every protocol turned on its head by a single patch on a jet that shouldn't exist. Inside the command center, the air had shifted from tense to stunned. The moment the lead F-35 pilot confirmed visual contact with the patch Echo Phoenix, the entire chain of command found itself staring at a memory long thought buried. It wasn't just a symbol. It was a signature. A whisper from a mission that had been scrubbed from official history, classified to the point of erasure. Only a handful of officers in the building had even heard of the squadron, and even fewer believed the stories surrounding it. The Echo Phoenix squadron had been an elite Black Ops unit formed for deep cover operations, flying missions no one else could. Missions that couldn't be acknowledged. Missions where failure didn't mean a debrief, it meant disappearance. When the squadron was decommissioned 10 years ago, it wasn't because of retirement or reassignment. It was after an op went sideways in hostile territory. A rescue gone wrong. Several aircraft down. One pilot never recovered. There was a memorial service, but no body. A name engraved, but no closure. Now that same insignia, the flaming phoenix rising from barbed wire, was back in the sky, gliding silently on the wings of a ghost. In a private room behind the main control floor, an older colonel leaned back from the monitor, his face pale. He had served alongside the Echo Phoenix unit in the early years. He remembered the call signs, the pilots, the code words used only when things were so far off the books they barely existed. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the secure phone and began calling up files that hadn't been opened in a decade. Clearance codes were required. Biometrics verified. And there it was, the last known image of the missing pilot and the archive specs of the aircraft she flew. Everything matched. Down to the modified nose cone and hull curvature. Down to the last maintenance log written before the craft vanished. Back out on the floor, the younger officers were still trying to understand what they were seeing. The Intercept order was technically still live. But now it wasn't just about airspace. It wasn't about threat detection or defense. It was about recognition of something far deeper than policy or protocol. It was about recognizing the truth behind a forgotten emblem. The emblem itself was more than just art. Every symbol within it told a story. The phoenix was a known mark of resurrection, survival. The barbed wire stood for capture, for missions behind enemy lines. The lightning bolt through the wings symbolized speed, silence, and surgical impact. These weren't just metaphors. They were badges earned through loss and impossible victories. And in that instant, those watching understood. Whoever was flying that aircraft wasn't just a pilot. They were a symbol of something that had once existed in the darkest edges of military operations. Something unshakable. Back in the air, the F-35 pilots had dropped their aggression. Formation shifted. Weapon systems remained on standby, but targeting was disengaged. Instead of boxing her in, they flew alongside her, wings parallel, close enough now to see the scuffs on the jet's body, the weathering on the patch, and the faint glint of a helmet behind the glass cockpit. The pilot inside never looked toward them. She didn't need to. She flew like she belonged. Like she knew this would happen eventually. The officers back on the ground were faced with a dilemma no manual had prepared them for. This wasn't an enemy. This wasn't a rogue. This was a reemergence. And in that moment, all the chatter, all the confusion, faded beneath one undeniable truth. They were looking at a relic that should have been a memory, wearing a mark that still demanded respect. The moment the pilots caught sight of the patch, a ripple of memory hit like a delayed shockwave. Echo Phoenix wasn't just a name or a call sign. It was a myth wrapped in silence, bound by oaths, and buried deep within the culture of those who had ever flown Black Ops skies. And now, soaring beside them, steady and unshaken, was a jet with that very insignia. It was more than strange. It was impossible. Inside the lead pilot's mind, the patch dragged forward memories he hadn't thought about in years. Not from training, not from briefings, but from whispered conversations, the kind that happened in hangars at 3 a.m., when no one else was around and everyone was too tired to lie. Stories of a mission that went off-grid in foreign territory. Of a pilot, female, sharp as hell, nicknamed Wraith, who had volunteered for an op that never came back. The last anyone saw of her was a blurry satellite image and a radar spike that vanished over hostile mountains. And now she was here, or someone wearing her mark was. The younger wingman, flying a few meters to the side, hadn't served long enough to remember the Echo Phoenix story firsthand. But even he recognized the look on his flight leader's face. This wasn't standard anymore. This wasn't normal. He watched in silence as the lead pilot adjusted position, not to box her in, but to fly alongside her. As if he wasn't protecting airspace, but honoring a procession. Inside the unidentified jet, no movement came from the cockpit. The canopy remained blacked out, shielded. But the way she flew, clean lines, unshaken by their presence, spoke of precision, of a hand that didn't flinch. She wasn't trying to escape. She wasn't trying to explain. She was returning. The message was in her silence. Down below, in the deepest level of the command building, files once thought closed were being accessed with trembling hands. Old mission logs, stored on encrypted drives, showed a last known entry with a date and time that matched the day Echo Phoenix vanished. The mission objective was still redacted, even to those with top clearance. But what mattered now wasn't what happened then. It was what her return meant now. As the F-35s flanked her, images from past briefings played in their minds. Satellite photos, audio fragments, a final transmission believed to be from her jet. Garbled, panicked, ending mid-sentence. The intel teams had said she was lost. The analysts had marked her Kia. The squadron had been officially dissolved. But not everyone believed it. Some had argued she might have survived. Others said the mission was sabotaged from the start. No one had proof. Until now, she carried no weapons. No threat systems lit up. But her mere presence was louder than a bomb drop. It asked every pilot who ever wore a patch what they would do if the Forgotten suddenly returned. If a ghost flew back into their skies not with demands, but with the quiet dignity of someone who had paid their dues in places no satellite had ever seen. And for the men flying beside her, the idea of challenging her, of treating her like an enemy, was becoming impossible. Because that insignia wasn't just a squadron marker. It was a grave marker. And somehow, the woman flying that jet had climbed out of that grave and brought her silence back with her. In the cockpit, the lead pilot glanced one more time at the emblem. His fingers hovered over the comms switch. But he didn't press it. What could he say to someone who had already said everything by surviving what no one else could? The command center had gone quiet, not because the situation was over, but because no one knew how to respond. Orders to intercept had not been rescinded, but they hadn't been reaffirmed either. The chain of command seemed frozen, suspended somewhere between awe and disbelief. What had started as a potential threat had transformed into something no one could define, an event that didn't belong to standard operating procedures. Protocols didn't account for ghosts with clearance. The F-35s adjusted their flight pattern, slipping into a protective escort formation rather than an aggressive posture. It was subtle, unspoken, the kind of shift that didn't need words, because both pilots understood the weight of what was happening. They weren't surrounding her. They were guiding her home. Every second in the air felt sacred, like something historic was playing out above the clouds while the rest of the world slept below, unaware. The lead pilot finally made a call to base. Short, measured. Target is now being escorted. Awaiting instructions for safe corridor. No one questioned the tone in his voice. It carried something beyond authority. Carried reverence. Back in the bunker, old hands and new recruits alike watched the screens as the 3 aircraft flew in formation. The one in the center bearing a name that hadn't been spoken in over a decade. Echo Phoenix. Once a legend. Now, a reality slicing through the silence of classified airspace. As they neared the perimeter of the base, security protocols updated in real time. Missile defense systems stood down. Landing zones cleared. A blacked-out hangar was reopened for the first time in years, its hydraulics groaning as if it, too, was waking from sleep. No announcements were made. No sirens blared. The event unfolded in a kind of collective silence, every technician, officer, and analyst knowing they were part of something history wouldn't officially record. The aircraft didn't deviate, didn't communicate, didn't slow until the final vector was in sight. Her path was direct, almost as if she knew the exact coordinates of the hangar before they were assigned. The F-35s held their positions at either side, reducing speed and maintaining visual contact. This wasn't an escort of control, it was one of respect. Whatever she had been through, whatever darkness she had flown through to return, they weren't about to let her land alone. Flight control teams watched from the observation deck as the unknown aircraft finally banked gently, cutting across the runway in a silent arc that displayed perfect control. The markings were clearer now. The patch, faded but undeniable, caught the glare of the floodlights. Even from a distance, it told a story none of them could ignore. One of service. One of sacrifice. One of silence that had lasted far too long. No one knew who would step out of the cockpit or if anyone would at all. No biometric tags were active. No visual scans could penetrate the dark canopy. But none of that mattered to the pilots flanking her. They had already made their decision. She was one of them. The wingman, younger and still visibly shaken by the magnitude of the moment, radioed in his final flight status. 3 in formation. Landing initiated. His voice, though composed, carried a tremor that betrayed the emotion gripping everyone present. Even he knew he would never fly a mission like this again. On the ground, emergency crews stood by, not out of fear, but formality. They knew the plane didn't carry threats, carried answers, questions, and the weight of a decade's worth of silence that was about to touch down on the same soil it once departed from.